If you're over 60 and paying for any kind of help at home, even just a few hours a week, I want you to listen very closely today, because there's a quiet truth most seniors never hear about, and it can cost you thousands of dollars every single year without you realizing it. The truth is, many home care expenses can legally lower your tax bill, sometimes by a lot. Yet most seniors either don't claim these deductions at all, or they assume they don't qualify and leave that money on the table. And that's exactly why we're talking today, because these aren't shady loopholes or risky tricks. These are real IRS-allowed deductions that exist specifically because aging costs money. In this video, we're going to walk through 3 little-known home care tax deductions most seniors miss, and how claiming them properly could put serious money back in your pocket. So let's not waste any time and jump right into the first one, because this alone surprises almost everyone I talk to. One of the biggest misunderstandings I see is this idea that home care is only deductible if you're completely disabled or bedridden. That's simply not true. If a doctor has determined that you need help with daily activities, even basic ones, a large portion of your home care costs may count as a medical expense. We're talking about help with bathing, dressing, moving safely around the house, using the bathroom, or even supervision if memory issues are starting to creep in. It doesn't mean you have to be helpless, it just means the care is medically necessary. Let me give you a simple example. Imagine you're in your late 60s or early 70s, living at home, and you've hired a caregiver to come in a few hours a day. Maybe they help you shower safely, prepare meals that fit a doctor-recommended diet, remind you to take medications, or make sure you don't fall while moving around. If a physician has documented that this assistance is needed for your health and safety, those caregiving costs can often be included as deductible medical expenses. What catches people off guard is that this can apply even if the caregiver isn't a nurse. It could be a home health aide, a personal care attendant, or even a trained caregiver from an agency. The key isn't the job title. The key is the reason they're there. If their services are tied to helping you function safely and maintain your health, that's where the deduction lives. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. You're probably saying, but I pay my caregiver out of pocket, and no one ever told me this mattered for taxes. That's exactly the problem. Many seniors assume if Medicare doesn't cover it, the IRS won't care. But the tax rules are different. The IRS looks at medical necessity, not whether insurance reimbursed you. Another thing that often surprises people is that these expenses don't disappear just because you're married or filing jointly. If you or your spouse needs care, and that care is medically necessary, those costs can be counted toward your combined medical expenses. For couples, this can push you over the threshold where deductions start to really matter. And here's an important detail most people miss. It's not just the hours spent directly helping you physically. In many cases, supervision counts too. If you're at risk of falling, wandering, or forgetting critical things because of cognitive decline, the time a caregiver spends simply being there to keep you safe may also qualify. That alone can dramatically increase the deductible amount. Before we move on, let me gently say this. If this is already opening your eyes, take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel, not because it helps me, but because this channel exists to protect seniors from missing out on things they've earned. Here, we also break down money, care, and legal topics in plain language, without pressure or fear tactics, so you can make smarter decisions for yourself and your family. Now, there's a second deduction that often goes hand in hand with caregiving, and it's one that almost no one thinks to track properly. This one hides in plain sight, and it has to do with your house itself. Because when your house changes to support your health, the IRS sometimes helps cover the cost.
Let's stay right here for a moment, because once you understand how the IRS looks at your home, a lot of expenses you may have brushed off as just part of getting older suddenly take on a whole new meaning. When your home is modified to support your health or mobility, those changes may qualify as medical deductions, at least in part and sometimes in full, and this applies far more often than most seniors realize. Think about the last few years. Maybe you added grab bars in the bathroom because stepping into the tub felt risky. Maybe you installed a walk-in shower, widened a doorway to fit a walker, added a ramp at the front entrance, or even lowered cabinets so you wouldn't have to reach or strain. Many people assume those are just home improvements, but when they're done for medical reasons, they're treated very differently for tax purposes. The IRS makes a distinction between upgrades that add value to your home and modifications that exist mainly to accommodate a medical condition. If the primary purpose of the change is to help you live safely and function independently, the cost may be deductible as a medical expense. In some cases, the entire cost qualifies. In other cases, the deductible portion is the cost minus any increase in the home's market value. And yes, that sounds complicated, but in practice, many of these modifications add little to no resale value, especially things like ramps or specialized bathroom fixtures, which means a surprisingly large portion of the expense may count. Here's where seniors often miss out. They don't keep receipts, or they forget why the change was made, or no one ever told them to connect it to a doctor's recommendation. A simple note in your medical records stating that these changes were needed for safety or mobility can make a big difference if you ever need to justify the deduction. It doesn't need to be dramatic, just honest and clear. Now let's widen the lens a bit, because caregiving doesn't only happen inside the home. Many seniors spend a quiet fortune getting to and from medical appointments, therapy sessions, diagnostic tests, and follow-up visits. And while it may feel like just another errand, some of those transportation costs can also be deducted. If you're using your own car to get to medical care, mileage counts. If you're paying for taxis, ride shares, or even public transportation because you can't safely drive yourself, those costs may qualify too. And if a caregiver drives you as part of their duties, that mileage can sometimes be included as well. Over a year, these small trips add up more than most people expect, especially if you're managing a chronic condition. What's important here is intention and documentation. The trip has to be primarily for medical care, not errands or social visits. But if you're heading to a doctor, a specialist, physical therapy, or anything related to diagnosis or treatment, that's where the door opens. Seniors often underestimate how powerful these small expenses can be when combined with caregiving and home modifications. Together, they can push your total medical expenses high enough to actually change your tax outcome. Now, there's another layer to this conversation that many people avoid because it sounds intimidating, but it doesn't have to be. If you pay a caregiver directly, especially one who works regularly in your home, you may be considered a household employer. And while that sounds like paperwork and headaches, it can also unlock deductions that people who pay under the table completely miss. Wages paid to a caregiver for medically necessary services can often be included as medical expenses. Employer payroll taxes, in some cases, may also count. This is one of those areas where people unintentionally lose money by trying to keep things simple. Doing things the right way may feel like extra effort at first, but it creates a clean paper trail that protects you and supports legitimate deductions. And I want to pause here to say something important. None of this means you have to figure it all out alone. A tax professional who understands senior care expenses can be worth their weight in gold. Many seniors assume accountants are only for wealthy people or complicated businesses, but when caregiving enters the picture, the rules change and guidance becomes protection. As we continue, everything starts to come together in a way that feels empowering rather than overwhelming, because once you see how these expenses connect, you start realizing this isn't about gaming the system, it's about using the system the way it was designed, so aging doesn't quietly drain your savings faster than it should. And that leads us naturally into the final piece of this puzzle, where many seniors are shocked by just how much they've been overlooking.
Let's bring this all home, because once you see the full picture, something important clicks into place. None of these deductions exist in isolation. They work together, quietly stacking up, and that's where the real savings often come from. The final deduction most seniors miss isn't about a single bill or receipt. It's about how all of these costs are viewed when they're tied to long-term care needs, even when that care happens right in your own living room. If you've been told by a doctor that you need ongoing help because of a chronic condition, mobility limitations, or cognitive changes, many of your care-related expenses may qualify as part of long-term care, and that matters because long-term care expenses are treated differently under tax rules. Care that supports your daily functioning, safety, and supervision isn't considered optional, it's considered necessary. That includes help with eating, bathing, dressing, transferring, and staying safe at home. For many seniors, this is where the biggest aha moment happens. They realize that the caregiver who helps them every day isn't just a household helper. That care may be part of a medically necessary plan that qualifies for significant tax relief. And when you combine caregiver wages, payroll taxes, home modifications, and transportation, the total can become large enough to make a real dent in your tax bill. What's especially important here is understanding timing. Some seniors assume they missed their chance if they didn't claim these deductions right away, but in many cases, past returns can be amended. That means money you thought was gone forever may still be recoverable. It's not uncommon for seniors to discover they overpaid for several years simply because no one connected the dots for them. I've seen this happen with couples as well. One spouse needs care, the other manages the household, and together they quietly absorb the cost without ever realizing the tax system recognizes this burden. When those expenses are finally documented properly, the relief can feel like a weight lifting off their shoulders. Now, I want to be very clear and reassuring here. You don't need to be an expert. You don't need to memorize tax codes or fight with forms on your own. What you do need is awareness and a willingness to ask the right questions. Keeping records, saving receipts, and making sure your doctor's recommendations are documented are simple habits that create options later. Options mean control, and control is something every senior deserves. If you've been paying for care and feeling that quiet worry about how long your savings will last, know this: you are not doing something wrong. Aging simply comes with costs that no one prepares us for. But there are systems in place meant to soften that financial blow, and you have every right to use them. If any part of this sounds familiar, or if you've had experiences with home care expenses that surprised you, I'd love to hear from you. Share your thoughts or questions in the comments. Your story might help another senior realize they're not alone, or help them catch something before it slips through the cracks. And if this video helped you see things differently, please take a moment to like it and subscribe to the channel. We're building a space here where seniors can get clear, honest guidance without fear or pressure, so you can make confident decisions about your money, your care, and your future. Remember this above all else: small details matter. The choices you make today, the questions you ask, and the records you keep can protect your independence far longer than you might expect. You've worked hard your entire life, and you deserve every benefit available to you. Here's to staying informed, staying empowered, and living your best life at any age.